everyone. Thank you for coming today to hear our author, Mary Johnson. My name is Deborah Regan, and I work over in the Learning Accommodation Center here. And I first met Mary back in 2006. She joined a writing group that I've been in for years, that's all women. And she was looking for a writing group to help give her some feedback on a manuscript that she was working on about her time as a nun with Mother Teresa's order. And when she started to present chapters of the memoir to us to critique, it was really clear to all of us that she had a very extraordinary and very unique story to tell, and that she's a remarkable writer. Her memoir provides the reader with a peek inside a very private world that very few of us know about, and insight into the really unique world of the Sisters of the Order of Missionaries of Charity. Mary served as a nun with them for 20 years, 15 of which she spent in Rome. She came to know Mother Teresa as few others have, and speaks with candor about her, both as a person and as a nun. After Mary returned to the U.S., she completed a bachelor's degree in English, and then a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And after her memoir was published, an excerpt of it was published in the Oprah magazine, and she was a guest on the Rosie O'Donnell show, so she's gotten a very good reception for her memoir. She's currently the creative director of A Room of Her Own's Foundation, which is a retreat for women writers. You'll find that Mary's very eloquent, both as a writer and a speaker, and she speaks with a lot of candor and insight about her experience as a nun, its joys and its tribulations. So please join me in welcoming Mary to Northern Essex.
Thank you, Deborah. It's really nice to be here today. This is my first time at Northern Essex Community College, and it seems like a terrific place. Everybody here's been really friendly, and you have a great campus, and it's just really a pleasure to be here with you today. I think before I read just a little bit from my memoir, I'll give you just a kind of a build-up, because I'm going to read something from kind of the middle. And then at the end, we should have questions. So if you want to discuss anything, how many of you have read my book, started reading my book, read a bit of it? Oh, so you're already, a lot of you are already pretty familiar with it. Okay. So anyway, when I was 17, I was a senior in high school. I was in Texas. I had been born in Michigan in Ann Arbor, and my family moved to Texas when I was 12. And I was in public school. I was walking down the hallway one day, and our library had these big glass doors. Libraries are special places for me. It's nice to be speaking again in a library. And I saw the cover of Time magazine, and there was this face on the cover. This woman with these wrinkles, and there was this heading, and it said Living Saints. And this was 1976. And I'd never seen this woman before. I went in, I took the magazine off the shelf, the bell rang for my French class, and I just ignored it. I never liked French all that much anyway. And I sat and I read this article, and I read about this woman in Calcutta who was taking the dying off the street. She was taking care of babies, she was feeding them, she was caring for the people whom nobody else was caring for. And I was immediately taken up by this. And somehow, in that moment, in the library in high school, I felt like this was God calling me to follow in her footsteps. You know, I was a senior, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And this just seemed to be it somehow. It wasn't what people were expecting me to do. I was the nerdy type in high school. I was editor of the school newspaper. I was on the debate team. Didn't have a real heavy social life. I was a nerd before the term was invented, you know. But I think people expected I was off to some sort of career in communications of one sort or another. But what I did is I went and I wrote a letter to Mother Teresa saying that I wanted to become one of her sisters. And I didn't really have an address. I wrote Mother Teresa, Calcutta, India. Well, I didn't get an answer to that one. I didn't get an answer to the next 3 or 4 letters I sent off. And in the meanwhile, I had to do something So I signed up to go to the University of Texas. I did that for a year, and during that year, the sisters did get in touch with me. I went to the South Bronx, which was the only place at the time that Mother Teresa had a convent in the United States. Now there are nearly 30 convents of missionaries of charity in various places in the United States. And decided, yes, I was going to join. So when I finished that year at the University of Texas, I sold whatever possessions I had to get my money for the plane ticket. I sold my French racing bike and my electric typewriter, and off I went to join the sisters. My parents weren't thrilled, but they had made a decision very early on in their marriage that they were not going to stand in the way of whatever their children decided they wanted to do. And so they allowed me to go. And when I joined there, I joined with 11 other young women. There were 12 of us in the beginning. And the first stage, it kind of takes a while to become a nun, a full-fledged nun. So the first 6 months are called aspirancy. And during those 6 months of, it's kind of like religious boot camp, you know, try everything out, see how you're going to manage. 10 of the young women left, and there were 2 of us who remained. And we went on to Rome to become postulants. And we joined there with some sisters who had made their aspirancy in London, some European sisters. And we were postulants for 6 months, and then we became novices. When we became novices, we got our hair completely cut off. We got white saris, like the ones that Mother Teresa used to wear, but as a novice without the blue stripes. Then after being a novice for 2 years, we took our first vows. Vows of chastity, poverty, obedience, and wholehearted and free service to the poorest of the poor. And when we took those vows, that's when we got the blue stripes, and then we were sent off into missions in various places all over the world. I was sent back to the South Bronx, and then we opened a new house in Washington, D.C., and I went to help start that house, and then a new house in Winnipeg, and I went there. And then it was time to prepare for my final vows. And I was already kind of having some doubts, you know, should I take these vows for life or not? Was this really the right place for me? I'd been kind of lonely through a lot of that time. We had these small communities of 4 sisters when I was in Washington, in Winnipeg. It was hard sometimes. I mean, I knew it was going to be hard, but it was hard in unexpected ways. The obedience thing became hard for me. I was a person with ideas, and my superiors liked it when they had all the ideas, you know? And I just didn't know. And I traveled from New York to Rome with Mother Teresa. And on the plane going to Rome to begin this preparation for my final vows, preparation that would take a year, I just watched her and the way she was relating to people. And I just realized, okay, so what I need to do is I need to figure out how she keeps going and what motivates her. And if I can figure that out, then maybe I can do it too. I'll have a better idea of what's possible and what I really want to do. And so I spent that year of preparation studying all the letters that Mother Teresa had written to the sisters over the years, the instructions she'd given. And I really kind of fell in love again with this vision of loving the unloved, of serving those that other people weren't serving. Of living this life of love really fully. And so I decided, yes, I was going to take my final vows, and I did. I was then assigned to study theology, which was a big shock for me and kind of terrifying because I liked studying, that wasn't the problem, but I knew that very few sisters in the Missionaries of Charity, unlike many other groups of sisters all over the world, and especially in the United States, the Missionaries of Charity weren't very well educated. There was a kind of an anti-intellectual streak. And the sisters who were sent to study, what it kind of meant was that you knew you would be spending the rest of your life forming the sisters, working as novice mistress, as tertian mistress, preparing the sisters to take their vows. And at the time, I was still really young. The whole prospect of, you know, it's kind of like I wasn't really sure what I was doing and how was I going to, you know, be leading these others. And, but that's what it was. And so I started my studies. After the first year of that, I got an assignment which was even more surprising for me. The Vatican had issued a new code of canon law, which required, among other things, that all communities of sisters throughout the world revise their governing documents. For us, it meant rewriting the constitutions in light of some of the changes required by this canon law. Mother Teresa had written the original constitutions on her knees at night when all the rest of the sisters went to bed 8 years before I was born. I was asked to rewrite those constitutions in light of this new code of canon law. I was given that job to do. I agreed to it on the condition that nobody would know I was doing it, because I was scared that it would somehow discredit the documents to have me doing this. And that was all agreed on, and I did that work for a while. When I finished my studies, as predicted, I was assigned to become novice mistress. And I was novice mistress in Rome, and that's kind of where this section that I'm going to read to you now begins. And so we'll start there. I'd been novice mistress at this point for 2 or 3 months. And it's August, and you'll hear the names of a few sisters as I read, and you really don't need to worry about that. You know, they're not going to reappear much. Don't worry about keeping them all straight. There were always a lot of sisters around in Rome. So, in early August, sisters from across Rome gathered to celebrate Sister Dominica's feast day. We were downing whole wheat chapatis and spicy egg bhaji, talking loudly with sisters we hadn't seen for a while, when Mother rapped the table with the butt of her knife, then spoke into the immediate silence. Another thing you might want to know is that Mother Teresa often spoke of herself in the third person. Okay? So she's speaking and she says, I'm sorry, I think I need some water here. We got it. It's here, thank you. She says, tomorrow, Mother is going to Sweden. No news here. Mother traveled a lot. And Sweden wasn't one of her most exciting destinations. We didn't even have sisters there yet. Sister Agnell, who seemed to be doing tolerably well as our new regional superior, leaned over her plate and added, Mother will be attending a gathering of all the different Christian religions. She paused a moment. And Sister May will accompany Mother. Sister Marie Therese's eyebrows rose. Postulants didn't accompany Mother. As I looked for Sister May, I realized that, of course, she wasn't there. Postulants didn't even write breakfast with Mother. Sister Agnell explained, the meeting is in Sister May's hometown, and the people there have asked for her. Dumbfounded silence followed. We never knew whom Mother would choose as a traveling companion. Most often it would be the regional superior, but sometimes a different sister would accompany Mother, usually a senior sister, nearly always a sister with final vows, never a postulant or a novice. Even though sending Sister May, an amiable, mature sister who had been a doctor before joining, might inspire other Swedish women to join, the news was still stupefying. From the far end of the table, I decided to break the silence, saying the first thing that came to mind. My sister lives in Sweden, Mother. Aja, Mother said, turning to Sister Agnell. I didn't know your sister was in Sweden, Sister Marie Therese said, looking piqued that I had a piece of information she didn't. Dorothy's a computer programmer for a Swedish telecommunications company. She's been in Stockholm 2 years now. I chewed slowly on my chapati, and Sister Marie Therese continued to stare at me. She'll probably go back to Dallas next year, I added. Sister Marie Therese lifted her chin and turned to the sister on the other side of her. Before long, Mother rapped on the table once more, looked straight at me, and said, Sister, Mother is taking you to Sweden. Excuse me, Mother? I hadn't expected that at all. Phone your sister and tell her to meet us at the airport, Mother said. Then, turning to Sister Agnell, but speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, she added, "The other sister is too young." Sister May and I were probably pretty close in age, but I wasn't going to argue my good fortune. I was going to travel with Mother. I'd be close to her, alone with her. Maybe I'd get a chance to ask her advice about my novices. Perhaps I could even be helpful to the woman who had shown me how to please God. That evening in the airport's VIP lounge, as we awaited boarding, Sister Agnell pulled me aside and opened my bag. "Take these," she whispered, stuffing 2 brick-like boxes into my bag. "Make sure you always have them with you." The weight pulled my arm down. "What's that?" I asked. "Miraculous medals. Make sure you don't run out." I should have known. Mother loved to give people these medals, which Our Lady had asked St. Catherine Labouré in 1830 to have cast and distributed throughout the world. Many people experienced cures after wearing miraculous medals. "And take this too." Sister Agnell poked me in the side with a small rectangular plastic box with several compartments. "Mother's medicine. Make sure she takes it on time, but be discreet. Mother doesn't like to take it because it reminds her she's sick." I nodded. A handwritten schedule was taped to the top of the box. Blue pill, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Green capsule with lunch, 2 white pills, 10 p.m. Since her 3rd heart attack 2 years earlier, Mother's energy had steadily declined, and her ankles were often swollen. Even so, she did more than any 78-year-old I'd ever met. We were the last passengers to board. They settled us in the first-class seats to which airlines always upgraded Mother, hoping to avoid the hubbub that would inevitably follow upon the knowledge that Mother Teresa was seated in coach. One by one, the flight attendants came to speak with Mother. One begged prayers for a daughter who had left the church. Another told Mother that her life had been changed after feeding babies in Shishu Bhavan in Calcutta. A third asked for a small note for my mother, who is very sick, to which Mother immediately responded by writing on a little card from her bag, "Jesus loves you very much. Suffering is the kiss of Jesus. God bless you, Mother Teresa." Each time, Mother turned to me and asked, "Medals, sister?" And I placed a few miraculous medals on her outstretched palm. Before giving the medals out, Mother kissed each one. As the plane taxied, Mother reached into the seat pocket in front of her and took out the International Herald Tribune they'd offered us when we boarded. I hadn't seen a current newspaper up close in years. "Another flood in Bangladesh," Mother said, shaking her head. "And still that war and famine in Ethiopia." She opened the paper more widely, offering me one end to hold, and pointed to a picture of a child with a distended stomach. "People are suffering so much. The sisters will have plenty to do." The picture resembled the photo of the child in the article in which I had first read the name Mother Teresa. "Mother," I said, "that picture reminds me of so many poor in the world, sister, so many poor." I kept quiet as Mother folded the paper and reached under the seat for her bag. She removed some letters, a pad, and a pen. Mother had work to do. I would talk later. Inside my bag, I found a book underneath the medals and the medicine. Sister Marie-Thérèse had given me Sharing the Darkness to see if it was suitable for the novitiate library, and I was about half through. The book was written by a doctor named Sheila Cassidy, who had worked in Chile, where she had been imprisoned and tortured for having treated a wounded revolutionary. After her release from prison, she entered a cloistered monastery for several years, then left religious life to work with the hospice movement. In her book, she tempered the austerities of religious life with humanity and common sense. Toward the end of a chapter in which she wrote about her experience of exhaustion, depression, and burnout, I read, Is it really the will of God that we should deny our humanity and work ourselves into the ground? I suspect not. The world longs for its Mother Teresa figures because it can put them safely on a pedestal and admire them. But it feels quite differently about nurses who do the same work, belonging to a trade union and protesting their salaries. I closed the book and shoved it in my bag, realizing how often I'd thought something similar. Mother never stopped working, and neither did we. Mother always rushed to be the first in the chapel for morning prayer. Then she often slept during meditation. I'd often thought that we might serve the poor better and with less irritation if we weren't dragging ourselves around. During a quick meal of gnocchi and pork, Mother listened to a middle-aged Italian man across the aisle tell her about his son's drug problem. When the flight attendant swept in to take the trays, Mother leaned forward, close to the attendant's face. "I need your help," Mother said. The attendant quickly replied, "Oh yes, Mother Teresa, anything." "All the leftover food, the food that people haven't opened but that you will have to throw away anyway," Mother explained, opening her hands wide. "Please, could you tell the people in the plane to collect it, and I will give it to the hungry?" Mother made this request each time she traveled by air. I'd met Mother at Fiumicino many times when she'd arrived with boxes and bags filled with mini candy bars, apples, crackers and cheese, little packets of instant cream, of sugar and salt. But this time, the flight attendant tried a diplomatic refusal. "I'm sorry," she said, "our rules don't allow it." Mother's appreciation for rules was unique in my experience. Mother adhered absolutely to the constitutions of the Missionaries of Charity, but the laws of nations, cities, towns, and airlines held no sway, especially when Mother could finagle something for the poor. Mother sat back in her seat, widened her smile, and sharpened the twinkle in her eye. "Just tell them that Mother Teresa is on board and that she has asked this favor for those who have no food." Continuing to smile, Mother locked the flight attendant's eyes with a penetrating gaze. "It's just a little thing," she said, "and anyone can do it." The flight attendant turned to her companion, who had overheard the conversation. They raised their eyebrows at each other. Until now, they'd guarded the fact of Mother's presence, hoping to avoid commotion. But they didn't want to refuse Mother Teresa, and it was clear that Mother was going to persist until she got what she wanted. Soon one attendant stationed herself at the curtain between business and coach and remained there throughout the flight. People in business class who had overheard the discussion brought their extra food directly to Mother, and she gave each of them a medal. She told me to ask a flight attendant for a trash bag. Meanwhile, another attendant wandered through coach, asking for donations. When we landed in Stockholm, the Catholic bishop, a Salvation Army major, a Lutheran pastor, a Catholic priest, several photographers, and Dorothy were all waiting for us. Dorothy looked a lot like I had before I joined, except better. Her hair was very well trimmed, and she wore a little makeup and a very nice suit. Amid popping flashbulbs and rounds of handshaking, which Mother tried to avoid by folding her hands to her chest in the prayerful Indian style of greeting, Dorothy and I spoke. When I asked for time off at work because my sister was coming to Sweden with Mother Teresa, they asked me why I didn't just ask for an extra day at the lake. And couldn't I think of a better excuse? Because they know I don't go to church, Dorothy said, a sparkle in her eyes. At this moment, a flight attendant carrying 3 trash bags approached Mother. Mother told her, "God bless you," then turned to the Salvation Army major. "I'm sure you could use this. Don't you feed the poor?" The major, who had no idea what was happening, accepted the trash bags from the flight attendant. It didn't matter to Mother that the little packets of salt and the handful of candy bars wouldn't alleviate world hunger. What was important was that nothing go to waste, especially not an opportunity to remind people of the poor. Meanwhile, the bishop approached me. "We'll be going now," he said. "I'm so sorry that I haven't found a convent for you and Mother as she requested, but the convent nearest Orebro is more than 2 hours away, so you'll stay with the Lutheran pastor and his family." I was beginning to understand my role. I was like the secretary of an important person. Practical questions which people didn't want to address to the important person were addressed to the secretary, who spoke to and for the important person. This made the secretary something of an important person too. I whispered, "Mother, it's time to go." "Acha," she said with a nod, then spotted Dorothy. "You must be the sister." Dorothy extended her hand, and Mother accepted it. "So, we are ready to go now. Come along," Mother said. "Come along?" Dorothy echoed. "Of course, you'll be coming with us." Mother turned and headed out, not waiting for a response. "I didn't know I was coming with you," Dorothy whispered to me. "Why didn't you—" "Come along now," Mother repeated as she turned around. Dorothy shrugged, and the Salvation Army major, hauling 2 trash bags, led the way out, followed by the priest who carried the third. During the first few miles in a large van, Mother nodded off several times, even in the middle of her own sentences. I wanted to speak with Dorothy, whom I hadn't seen in 4 years, but we were all trying to be quiet so Mother could rest. Still, Mother woke and asked, "Are we reaching yet?" The bishop answered something about how beautiful the countryside was. When Mother woke again, she repeated, "Are we reaching yet?" The Salvation Army major told her how happy people would be to see Mother Teresa the next day. She dozed off again, head on my shoulder, and everyone kept very quiet. Eventually, Dorothy leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Is it real? Pinch me." I pinched, and she pinched back. Mother snoring on my shoulder, a ride in a van through the forests of Sweden, still light at nearly midnight in August, my sister at the airport, VIP lounges, alone with Mother. It was a dream, wasn't it? When we pulled into the dark driveway of the Lutheran pastor's home in Orebro after 2.5 hours of driving, I asked the Salvation Army major the time, and he told me it was 12:20. The pastor's wife, 2 grown sons, and a daughter came to the van to greet us, all of them as tall and thin as birch trees grown too close together. All I could think of was bed, but Mother seemed to have regained her energy. After the priest said he'd be back in the morning at 8 to pick us up, the pastor's wife asked if we'd like something to eat, and Mother said yes. Inside, I watched Mother smile as the pastor's wife removed a tray from the refrigerator and placed it gently on the brick island in the middle of the kitchen. Then Mother's face drooped. On the tray were 10 delicately stacked, open-faced finger sandwiches, each about 1.5 inches square, some with cheese, others with smoked salmon. Mother wouldn't have asked to eat unless she was really hungry, and now I saw her calculating the division of the 10 delicacies among the 8 of us. The pastor asked Mother for a prayer, but she deferred to him, and after everyone had a few bites, Mother watched as the pastor's wife put the tray and its 2 remaining sandwiches back in the refrigerator. I leaned close to Mother's ear. "If Mother is still hungry—" "No, sister." The pastor took Dorothy off to the study, and his wife led Mother and me to a medium-sized room with delicately flowered wallpaper and twin beds with pink chenille bedspreads. "I hope this will do," she said. "Thank you very much," Mother said, folding her hands at her chest and bowing. "Thank you. God bless you." The pastor's wife shut the door, and I put our bags down on the armchairs, while Mother set a lamp on the floor and began pushing the nightstand. "Mother, may I help you?" "A chapel, sister. We must have a chapel." We dragged the nightstand to the center of the room, and Mother asked for her handbag. Reaching inside, she pulled out a plastic statue of Mary, about 4 inches high, the greenish-yellow kind that glows in the dark. Mother kissed the statue, then placed it gently at the center of the nightstand. "Do you have a candle, sister?" "No, Mother, but I saw flowers in the living room." "Bring one." In the kitchen, I filled 2 glasses with water, then picked out a bright red zinnia from the arrangement on the coffee table and put it in one of the glasses. Back in the room, I handed the makeshift vase and flower to Mother. "Acha, very good, sister." I took the medicine box from my bag. Mother's last dose had been scheduled for 10, and I could have given it to her if I'd remembered, but I'd been too excited and distracted. Taking out the appropriate pills, I offered them to Mother with the other glass of water. "Not now, sister. After night prayer." "But Mother, it's already so late." Mother knelt in front of the nightstand. "In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." I put the glass and the medicine on top of the other nightstand, then knelt down next to Mother. There was something strangely sweet and weirdly intimate about kneeling in front of a nightstand with a fluorescent Mary between 2 beds with pink bedspreads in the house of a Lutheran pastor at 1 a.m. Mother led the prayers and I answered, just Mother and me and Our Lady. When we finished our prayers, I offered Mother the medicine again and she took it. In the meantime, I turned down Mother's bedspread and set her nightdress on the pillow. When I turned around, Mother was examining a digital clock on the remaining nightstand, turning it over in her hands. "Sister," she said, "please set the alarm." This was a simple clock, like the one I'd had near my bed before I joined the sisters. But all missionaries of charity clocks were still the wind-up kind, and Mother was obviously confused by all the buttons. "Yes, Mother. What time shall we get up?" "Father is coming at 8, so we should have breakfast by 7:30. Mother counted on her fingers. "Before that, we need to finish morning prayer and meditation and also spiritual reading, which means," she concluded, looking up at me, "that we should start prayers at 6. We'll also need to make the beds, so we should get up at 5:30. "But Mother, it's nearly 1:30 now." "Yes, sister." She dug in her bag again and handed me a small bottle of holy water. I blessed the beds. After saying her prayers by the side of the bed, Mother began to snore moments after her head hit the pillow. I set the alarm for 6:40. May God forgive me. When the clock sounded some 5 hours later, Mother's "Let us bless the Lord" was nearly simultaneous with the clock's electric buzz. "Thanks be to God," I answered, rolling out of the bed and onto the pink shag. Mother led the prayers in a loud voice with her usual conviction, and I answered, very groggy. Mother finished dressing before I did and went off to the bathroom. While she was gone, I quickly made her bed, then mine. When I turned around, Mother was already kneeling in front of the chapel, her hands folded and head bowed in front of our Swedish altar. As I hurried to the bathroom, Mother looked up and pointed to the clock. "Sister, it's late." "Yes, Mother," I said. I grabbed my toothbrush, dashed to the bathroom, rounded the corner in the hall, and rammed into Dorothy. "What's happening?" she whispered, eyes barely open, standing just outside the study door. "Isn't it very early?" "We're going to say our prayers. Mother wants to have breakfast about 7:30. She groaned. Dorothy had always been the late sleeper in our family. She closed the study door behind her. In the bathroom, I remembered Mother's medicine, so I stopped in the kitchen to get a glass of water. When I returned to the bedroom, Mother knelt on the carpet, already halfway through morning prayer. "Where have you been? It's late." "Sorry, Mother," I said, reaching for the pill container. "I just went to get some water for your medicine." Mother took the medicine and water, and I looked down to Mother's open prayer book, the place marked by a small card with a picture of Jesus' face, crowned with thorns. At the bottom of the card, Mother had written in her own round script, "Jesus, I love you very much." I was embarrassed to have stumbled across something so intimate. I also felt privileged. The card confirmed what I already knew, that Mother's love for Jesus animated everything she did, that it was the source of all her energy. And seeing it written in her own hand made my heart beat faster. "Sister," Mother handed me the empty glass. Then we continued the prayers where she left off. When we reached the point where Mother should have begun the prayer before meditation, she sat back on her heels, turned to me, and said, "We should have spiritual reading now. We can make meditation quietly in the car later." I nodded. "You read," Mother said, handing me her book. "First from mine, then from yours." Aloud? From mine? Why couldn't we have silent spiritual reading, each from her own book, like usual? I supposed Mother was tired. It would be easier for her if I read aloud. But how in heaven's name was I going to read Sheila Cassidy's criticisms to Mother? I supposed I could start at the beginning of the book. There was no overt criticism of Mother there. But Cassidy's Sharing the Darkness was an undeniably modern book on every page, not the sort Mother would approve. And what if she told me to start where I'd left off? I opened the book Mother passed to me, a collection of the writings of St. Peter Julien Aimard, a 19th century French priest. Mother slumped on the rug next to me and closed her eyes. I read slowly, carefully. "Belong entirely to God through love, entirely to your neighbor through a gracious charity, entirely to the divine Eucharist by the offering and sacrifice of your whole self." I'd avoided what I secretly termed devotional drivel ever since my first profession, when I'd been allowed to choose my own books. But Peter Julien was speaking Mother's language of simple love for Jesus, and it fit this morning. I silently begged, "Please, Mother, let me read this book to you all morning. Forget about my book." Be the apostle of the divine Eucharist, like a flame which enlightens and warms, like the angel of his heart who will encourage those who love him and are suffering. I read even more slowly, and Mother's head began to nod. "Please pray that, like the bread of the sacrifice, I may lose my life, my substance, my personality, to be changed into the spirit and life of Jesus, retaining only a human appearance, humiliation, and poverty." I was beginning to lose patience with Peter Julien. I wondered what Sheila Cassidy might say to him. I droned on, and soon Mother's chin was on her chest. A nagging voice inside me asked, "Why are you reading books that you can't read in front of Mother anyway?" My excuse was that I hadn't chosen it. Sister Marie-Therese had given it to me. "But you agree with it, don't you?" I just swallowed and tried to keep my voice even, continuing to pray that Mother not wake up. At 7:30, I just stopped. Mother looked up. "Keep reading, sister." "Mother, it's time," I said, nodding toward the clock. "But what about your book?" she asked. As I reached for it, she shook her head and said a concluding Hail Mary. Never was I happier to repeat, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners." That morning we had Mass in the little Catholic church. Mother gave out miraculous medals to everyone we met. All the people at Mass, people on the street, everyone who crowded around. Dorothy carried half the medals in her bag to make the wait tolerable. And when I ran out, she restocked me. Back at the house, after a lunch of light soup, Mother returned to our room. There hadn't been much for breakfast either. I was still hungry, and I was pretty sure Mother was hungry too. Our hosts must have read the magazine myths about Mother Teresa eating only a slice of bread and a banana for breakfast and a plate of rice for lunch. When no one was looking, I swiped 2 bananas and an apple from the fruit basket on the living room table. In the bedroom, Mother looked up, hands in her bag. She nodded at the fruit in my hands and smiled. "Acha, sister, where did you get those?" "From a basket in the living room." "You didn't ask for them, did you?" "No, Mother, they were on the table. They must have left them there for anyone who wants them." "Very good," she said. Then she drew her hands out of her bag and opened them to reveal several caramels and a couple of peppermints. Reaching in again, she pulled out a few small wrapped chocolates. "Take the apple and some of these to your sister," Mother said. When I came back, Mother was halfway through a banana, and several crumpled candy wrappers lay on the nightstand next to the digital clock. That afternoon, after several meetings, Mother asked for a medal for a teenager with a bright purple mohawk. "Sorry, Mother, there aren't any more." "Sister," Mother said, "I need to give him Our Lady." She looked at me with a frown that made me feel 2 inches tall. "I'm sorry, Mother." She just shook her head, then turned to the boy. "God bless you," Mother told him, and he smiled. That evening, Mother looked so small behind the podium, which came to the middle of her neck. Though thousands of people gazed on her from every corner of the stadium, applauding ever more loudly, Mother was still looking down when the Archbishop raised his hand for silence. Then Mother began. "The poor people are great people. Once someone told me about a Muslim family who had no food. So I took a bag full of rice to them, and the mother thanked me. And then I watched as she divided the bag in 2. I asked her what she was doing, and she told me they are hungry too. A Hindu family next door. They were hungry too." Dorothy, hands in her lap, leaned forward, eyes fixed on Mother. No one in the crowd moved. I'd heard this story countless times, but each time it still moved me. Would I have that kind of generosity if my family were starving? All people hunger for love, whether they are Christian or Muslim, Hindu or atheist. As Christians, we are all called to be a sign of God's love to everyone we meet. Then we will radiate Christ to the world. That was the whole reason I had joined, the reason I was sitting beside Mother, to bring love to the world. I experienced an enormous surge of goodwill, as though all the people in the stadium and all those watching on television were being moved to loving action because of Mother. The world was a better place because of Mother and what she did, because of what we did. At the reception after the prayer meeting, Mother kept repeating the same stories to the same people, and most of them involved numbers. 5,000 people fed in Calcutta every day, more than 200 MC tabernacles throughout the world. The way she repeated herself was embarrassing. Mother was obviously exhausted. The Archbishop arranged for a private plane to return us to Stockholm. On board, Mother slept, and Dorothy and I talked in whispers, trying to squeeze 4 years of news into a half-hour flight. My parents had sent her a photocopy of one of my recent letters, and she asked me what novices were and why I was their mistress, curling her nose a little at the word. I knew I should ask her why she didn't go to church anymore, but I didn't feel like it. Dorothy looked happy when we hugged in the airport. She thanked Mother and gave her a hug too, which Mother didn't refuse, though she didn't hug back either. From Stockholm to Rome, Mother spoke again to each flight attendant and to everyone in first class. Again, she asked for a collection of food, Again, there was no time to talk to Mother about my novices and their troubles. Mother returned the next day to Calcutta, and everyone asked me about the trip. I told them Mother was tired but never wanted to slow down, that she kept giving and giving and giving. I told them how everyone in the stadium had listened to Mother so attentively, how she'd told them the story of the Muslim family who shared with the Hindus. I didn't say a word about the intimate card in Mother's prayer book, though I thought of it often. 3 days later, Sister Agnell phoned. "Mother's had another heart attack," she said, her voice shaking. "She's in the hospital in Calcutta." Immediately, I remembered the pills I hadn't given Mother on time. I should have been able to find a way to give her more rest. I'd caused her stress when the metals ran out. I should have found her more food. Perhaps if Sister May, the doctor, had accompanied Mother, this heart attack could have been avoided. That entire day and for several days after, I walked around in a daze. Mother was later transferred to Forest Grove Nursing Home in Calcutta, where she stayed for 3 weeks. They said that she would never be able to travel again, never be able to address large crowds. I asked special permission to write to Dorothy, and I spoke to Sister Marie-Therese and to Sister Agnell. I told them I was grateful for the opportunity I'd had, perhaps the last opportunity anyone would have to travel with Mother. I asked forgiveness for my negligence. Dorothy wrote back that it wasn't my fault. Sister Marie-Therese scolded me and told everyone in the novitiate that I'd been irresponsible and that Mother's heart attack was payment for my ineptitude. Sister Agnell said it was impossible to take care of Mother, that Mother wanted to work no matter what, that she wanted to die on her feet, giving all to Jesus, and that I shouldn't blame myself. I wrote to Mother, thanking her for letting me accompany her, telling her how sorry I was that she was ill. I assured her of my prayers and thanked her for letting Dorothy come along. I also told her I wanted to help the novices become good missionaries of charity, but so often didn't know how. I never received an answer to that letter. When Mother was released from the nursing home, she wrote to the Pope, asking permission for a special general chapter to elect a sister to take her place as Superior General. The news surprised and saddened many sisters. It saddened me too, though I thought it sensible. Perhaps Mother had finally recognized the need to take a break, not to overextend herself. She probably knew the transition to a new Superior General would be difficult for many sisters and wanted to be around to facilitate the change. The Pope gave permission for the special election, and we began year-long preparations for the chapter and the election of Mother's successor. Okay. So that's the end of that part. You got a little glimpse, close-up of Mother Teresa. The story continues. I don't want to give too much away because I hope that those of you who haven't read the book will read it. Obviously, at a certain point I leave. But if you have any questions about any of that, anything at all, about the writing, about the story, about Mother Teresa, about any of it, now's your chance. If you could speak loudly, that'd be great.
Well, I haven't finished reading your entire book, but I am fascinated as I'm reading it how you entered a system which seemed as if it would have a lot of perfection, and how you are adjusting to all the contradictions that happen.
Yeah, contradictions like?
Contradictions of characters of people, and right and wrong, and how people treat each other, and the education, you mentioned the intellectual versus the uneducated, and the different roles that people play.
Whenever you get a group of people together, it's always interesting to see what happens, right? So you get the missionaries of charity together. You have a group of very devoted women, very self-sacrificing women. You have women from all over the world of all sorts of different backgrounds. You have people living together, some of whom grew up in little villages, and all of whom have learned to speak English, nearly all of them as a second language. So we're communicating, as best we can. You have people with very much different ideas, as you said, of what's right and what's wrong. And you put all of that inside a structure where everyone is supposed to be aiming for perfection, okay? And it's kind of a recipe for conflict of various sorts. Even though you're devoted to living a loving life, you're devoted to serving others, at the same time, you don't get a lot of comfort in the whole thing, okay? I kind of describe it sometimes, you know how in the church there's a spectrum of religious life, kind of like the military, okay? You have the military where you have all of these different people who are working together to defend the country, but they do it in different ways. And so like you have the Coast Guard is maybe on one end, and you have the Army and the Air Force and the Marine Corps, and you have the Navy SEALs, and you have the Green Beret, so you have these people with different levels of commitment, different levels of difficulty, different levels of how radically they take this job. And the missionaries of charity are way over here with the Navy SEALs and the Green Beret, okay? You have a lot of Catholic sisters who all of whom are living vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, but not taking it to the extremes that the missionaries of charity are. And because our lives were so extreme and we had really none of the normal comforts, it's complete separation from our families. We were allowed to write our families once a month, just 2 sheets of paper that we could send to our parents. We could not talk with them by phone. We were allowed to visit our families once every 10 years for 2 weeks at a time. We slept in common dormitories. There was no privacy in any part of our lives. You were never ever alone. There were one bed after another with nothing else in between. We had 2 sets of clothes. We washed the clothes every morning, put them out to dry. You prayed it wouldn't rain so that you could change the next day. We were living a life which was meant to mirror the lives of the poor that we serve, so that we would be serving them from a place of understanding, a place of compassion, not a place of power. And that's a really good idea, but at the same time, if you're completely giving yourself all the time working, you need a little something, And all of those things together meant that the missionaries of charity, there were lots of differences of opinion. There were lots of clashes. There were lots of times where, you try as hard as you can, but things, you get on each other's nerves. You're living with people that you don't choose to live with, people that you're just kind of thrown together with. And it just makes for some interesting combinations sometimes. And I think one of the things that I've often heard from people who read my book is they get kind of hung up on the fact that the sisters in their mind are kind of mean to each other, and there is a certain meanness every now and then, kind of undeniable, but at the same time it was just part of the way things worked. It was a sign that something was not quite right. It was a sign. These were not mean people per se. These were people who wanted to dedicate themselves to love. But we're stuck in this system where they didn't get any support for that. And it was hard. It was hard. Very long answer, sorry. Yeah.
What qualities do you think that Mother Teresa had that led to her to be so successful?
Yeah, Mother Teresa was astonishing. She was definitely the most self-sacrificing person I've ever met, and she was the most focused. If you want to talk about successful in the sense that, she started the Missionaries of Charity. She got canonical approval in 1950. By the time she died in 1997, she had over 2,000 sisters following her. She had branches of active sisters, active brothers, contemplative brothers, and priests, plus co-workers throughout the world. The Missionaries of Charity, when she died, were in 130-something countries throughout the world. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that she was very focused, and that she was very sincere in what she did, and people could see that. She really meant it about living poor like the poor. She really meant it about, giving her whole life in service. And people were happy to support that. And young women and men were drawn to that kind of radical life. You knew that if you were joining this group, you were doing something significant with your life. And I think that was a lot of it. Yeah. Yes?
Not without the presence of Mother Teresa, because I'm sure she still is very present in the missionaries, but has there been a shift of, I don't know, not direction, but, without her being...
Yeah.
Because she is, or was, so powerful.
Yes, she was very powerful, and she died 15 years ago, and in these 15 years since she's died, Mother died 3 months after I left the sisters, okay? And so the things that I will say about the Missionaries of Charity now have to be tempered by the fact that I'm not really supposed to have much contact with them. They really don't want that. And so any sister who leaves, they make a kind of a big deal about that, more so than any other group of sisters I know. You leave and you're supposed to be out. I did go back several times. I went back when Mother Teresa was beatified, and I attended that, and it was really good to see the sisters, and I had some good conversations with them. I've been back to Italy several times and seen them. And the sisters who know me are always really happy to see me, and that all goes really well. But like in the United States, I went back to visit the house in Washington where I had started that house, and I didn't know any of the sisters who were there at the time, and they didn't know me, they just heard of me. I went for Mass in the morning, and at the end, when any visitor would have been offered, some coffee and a little breakfast, they told me that if I was hungry, I should wait around a couple hours and I could eat with the soup kitchen people. It's this complete separation once you get out, it's kind of strange. But what I do know, from the contact that I do have and from people who've told me, and the fact that a lot of people have gotten in touch with me, especially after the book has come out, that the sisters basically are continuing in the same way, and that when they're faced with a decision, what they ask themselves is, what would Mother do in this situation? Which to me is maybe not the most helpful question. Because first of all, you can never really know, and second of all, that's not asking what is the thing that really needs to be done now. Perhaps always in the spirit, continuing of what she did, but I don't know. But I think basically they are continuing pretty much as they had been. Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
When you began your new venue with creative writing, how did you get inspired, and how did that all take place?
Yeah, well, writing had kind of always been important to me. Like I said, I worked on the school newspaper when I was in high school. When I was with the sisters, I had opportunity to do some writing things. And when I left, adjusting to everything was kind of huge. I came out, I had never seen a microwave, I'd never seen an ATM, I didn't know how to pump my own gas, because when I joined it was all the full service thing, computers. I mean, even the first time my sister took me to a restaurant, and I had this menu. Nobody had asked me in 20 years what I wanted to eat, So it was like this huge momentous decision. So in the beginning, life kind of centered around getting used to all those sorts of things. But people would always ask me, about my life and my experiences, and I just kind of, they'd say, you should write a book. And I thought, well, who knows? And I went back and I knew that I had to finish my undergraduate degree. And so I did that, and I got it in English, and I took all the creative writing courses, and I got a lot of encouragement in so many different ways. And I decided that I would go to graduate school to really concentrate on finding a way to write my story. And it was very tricky for me because I was working for the church at the time. I was working full-time for the church, which meant that I had $15,000 a year salary, and graduate school was $5,000 a semester. And I didn't really know how I was going to work this. I couldn't get a student loan. I had no credit history, you know. I went as part of my job with the church for a continuing education course at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. And while I was there, I had 2 weeks. The first week was this theology course, and the second week I was supposed to be on this course with Marilyn Robinson, whom some of you might know. She's a novelist who's written wonderful books, Housekeeping, Home, Gilead, which won the Pulitzer Prize a couple years ago. And, but I found out late in the process that actually she was going to be doing this Calvinist theology that week, and it's going to be pretty hard-hitting, and this was not what I wanted at the time. And because everything else was full, I ended up in this group called Circle of Women. And this is a long answer, but it really does come to your story in just your question there. I found myself in this group. You know how you are in those groups and you go around and I say, I'm Mary Johnson, I'm from Beaumont, Texas. The reason I'm here is because Navajo weaving was full and pottery was full and hiking is full, and I'm here, and I think you should know this is my 5th choice, and at this point in my life I really don't trust women very much, and especially not older women. And I was the 2nd youngest woman in the group, and they all just kind of sat there and listened, took that in. And then, you know, it went on for a few days, and you do that kind of sharing thing that you do. And the leaders came to me one afternoon and said, we want you to tell this group what it is you need. I said, I don't think so. I said, no, you have to tell this group what you need. And you go back to your room, go take a hike, whatever you want, and in the evening when you come back, you're going to tell us all what you need. And so I thought about it, you know, what is this? I knew I wanted to write my story. The financial situation was very precarious. I was living at the time with 2 other ex-sisters. There was no privacy in the house. We were sharing this computer in this little tiny corner. In Santa Fe, before I went to Ghost Ranch, I picked up this book. And I thought about this book as I was wondering, how do I tell them what I need? And when I went back to the group that evening, I said, what I need is I need a room of my own. The book I'd picked up was A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, in which she talks about the fact that women need financial security and privacy if they're going to be able to write, and I really had neither. And so I explained what I needed, that I wanted to tell this story, that I needed some help. I went back to my room. Half an hour later, there's this knock on this door, and this little woman is standing there, a little woman with orange hair, and she says, that room of your own, I think I can help you with that. And so she came in, and she offered to pay my graduate school tuition if I'd help her start a foundation to help women writers. And that's how A Room of Her Own Foundation began. On the table in the back, I have a little bit of some literature about that organization. I have some books, little postcards of books that are connected with women who belong to that group that you might want to take a look at. We just closed the application period for the 6th $50,000 gift of freedom that we offer for a woman writer to give her time to write over 2 years. We have retreats in New Mexico every other year where it's my job, I'm the creative director of retreats, so I kind of organize that, and we gather women from all over the world actually. Last year Marilyn Robinson was our keynote speaker. She came back for that, and that was terrific. So this whole women telling their stories, creative women finding ways to help each other has become very, very important to me. And so that's a big part of the inspiration for the creative writing thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. And I don't remember the exact circumstances in reading when you said this, but that suffering was the kiss of Jesus. And I know that that is a kind of traditional Catholic attitude. However, I find that, many people find it, I think, very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you could have any further elaboration about how that is true. Because I know, I have 2 sons who have some very severe diseases, and it hasn't been a positive thing for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you heard there in the back, but the whole idea of suffering being the kiss of Jesus. This was something that Mother Teresa said very often. And she used to repeat it, this story that she went into the hospital one day and there was a woman who had cancer who was suffering very much. And Mother told her, suffering is the kiss of Jesus. And the woman looked up and she said, Mother Teresa, please tell Jesus to stop kissing me. And Mother would repeat this and she would laugh, but I'm not sure she ever understood exactly where that woman was coming from. As missionaries of charity, what I found was that we lived this kind of schizophrenic existence with this kind of spirituality that glorified suffering, and at the same time, we were supposed to be working to alleviate suffering. I mean, our whole lives were there, feeding the hungry, caring for the dying, taking care of the lonely, giving shelter. But suffering was what brought you really close to God. And so, for me, it really was schizophrenic. I mean, you can't really combine those two things very well. And Mother Teresa was the kind of person who didn't spend a lot of time thinking logically about things. She was a very practical person who went out and did what needed to be done. And she was also a person who we discovered after she died had a lot of interior darkness. There were those letters that came out where she had written to her spiritual directors talking about her doubts, talking about this spiritual suffering that she felt. And the explanation that she finally got from a priest after she'd been experiencing this for 6 or 7 years was this priest told her, Mother Teresa, this suffering you're experiencing is not a sign that God is far from you or that you've displeased God. It's a sign that you are so close to God that you've become so close to Jesus on the cross that he can kiss you from the cross, and you're sharing his suffering. And this story was what made it possible for Mother Teresa to continue, even with all the doubts she had and the suffering that she felt inside, because, okay, so suffering is what brings me close to God. And it's that certain kind of explanation that helped her, but that also warped everything.
Yeah, because I understand what you said before, because I was thinking that also, about how you can say suffering is good, but yet your whole job is to help people who are suffering. I mean, that seems
It's not logical.
very contradictory.
It is.
In fact, I started to read that book that you mentioned about her letters, and I didn't get very far, because I got to the part where she was leaving Albania, and saying how she really wanted suffering, and how this is what she was looking for, was suffering. And I already had my own problems with my sons, and in their experience so far, it's been more of a distorting thing than anything helpful.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and that's just such a common question about why suffering, why these things happen.
We try to find an explanation, don't we? We say that the suffering is what will purify you, or the suffering will make you stronger, and sometimes you do grow through suffering, and sometimes suffering crushes you. I mean, that's a reality. And I think glorifying suffering is a big mistake from my point of view. But it was Mother Teresa's mode. Yeah. So, maybe this will be the last question.
Can you just talk a little bit about the role faith has played in your life since you left the charity?
Yeah. So I still consider myself a very loving person. It's still, many of the things are, still very important to me from what I learned from when I was with the sisters, the sort of compassion, the sort of meeting people where they are. But I don't have the same sort of religious faith as I did then. And it's been a big process, a big journey. And in fact, this is what my second book is going to be about. And it's something that I think a lot about. Tomorrow, actually, in Groton, tomorrow and Sunday, I'll be teaching a workshop on trying to figure out what it is you believe, because we're always told all sorts of things about what we're supposed to believe, what we're supposed to think. And I think it's really important each of us discover where we are on that journey. I mean, if you're interested in that, you can find it on my website or whatever. But yeah, the whole faith thing has been a real evolution, and when Sunday is over, then all my speaking events are over, and for 3 months I'm just going to be working on writing and addressing those questions, and then maybe I'll have a more concise answer for you, because I'm still actually all figuring it all out. But it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot for me. Yeah. So you've been a great audience. I think there are still a couple books for sale, and I'll be signing books back there, and I'll be happy to talk to you, and there are refreshments. And is there anything else people need to know?
No, just to thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big question, that whole suffering. I know. Have you read it yet?
No,
not yet.
No, I just got it today.
Right. What brought you here today?
I just always adored Mother Teresa. I just wanted to meet someone that met her and worked with her. It's an honor to meet you.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for all your work you've done.
Sure. Hi.
You know, I also identify what you were saying about being able to take care of yourself enough to take care of others.
It's important.
Because I have been a teacher.
It's hard. It's very hard.
Wanting to serve people.
When you're depleted yourself. Yeah. Absolutely. Hi. Maureen?
I bought
Excellent.
her this book for her 80th birthday. She
Oh,
just turned
wow.
80. And I, knew
I would
she'd
never
love it.
guess that. 80.
I loved it, everything you said.
Thank you. Maureen. Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Maureen.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
That whole issue of love in another way. You know, that whole essential piece and the fact that, I mean, this was focused really on Mother Teresa and the religious piece, but I found the other
Yeah.
part of your book the most interesting for me.
Yeah.
And it was very, very nicely done, and you were very honest about what those experiences were like. So,
Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, that's great. Sure, my pleasure.
With MaryJohnson, you wrote An Unquenchable Thirst, a book dealing a lot with your experiences with Mother Teresa. I thought you talked here in Northern Essex. It was an amazing talk.
Well, thank you. It's a great crowd.
I know, and I mean, I can't believe, I mean, I consider Mother Teresa as being at the top of, you know, the spiritual world. I mean, I think that's what how everybody feels about. You know, nobody really knows her personally like you do, like you did.
Yeah, I think Mother Teresa was an extraordinary woman. And she never really told her own story. She always let other people tell the story. She didn't want to talk about herself much. So she was kind of hard to get to know. But when you live with her, then you get to see, you know, things slightly different. And she was a more complex person than most people appreciate, I think. And it was a real privilege to get to know her. She was an extraordinary woman.
Now, you said you first saw her on the cover of Time magazine. Is that how you first?
I did. That's in 1976 when I was in high school. It's the first encounter I had. I had never heard of her before that.
I know, it's something about her face. I mean, I don't think you could look at her, I mean, unless you're a totally cold human being and not see the love she had for people.
Yeah, she did. She did have an incredible amount of love for people. And I think also because she had that reputation also, somehow we also saw what we needed to see in her. I think that's sometimes what we do, to see her as, you know, someone who was like the perfect person. And I don't think anybody is really a perfect person, and that's kind of why I try to, you know, show her in a more three-dimensional light and to get to know her a little bit more personally. She was somebody I had a lot of respect for, great deal of admiration, and the more you get to know her and the more you get to know the things that she was fighting against herself, the more incredible she becomes. Or perhaps maybe the more credible, the more you can believe her and get to know her as a person.
Yeah, I think that's what's amazing about her, is that she, I think, you know, that's what people forget, underlying all saints and Jesus, and there was a human being underneath it all with the same feelings and emotions and feeling the same pain.
That's right. But we're all human, and I think that, you know, we need to recognize that, especially for the people that we're holding up somehow as ideals. Because if we're holding up somebody as an ideal, and even that person didn't live up to the ideal that we're projecting on them, then we're asking ourselves impossible things. So I think it's good that we see each other as human beings and everybody trying our best.
Yeah, I heard you answer a question near the end about somebody inquiring about human suffering. I think the way you answered was just perfect in a way, because you're saying you don't have all the answers.
Oh, no, far from it.
And I think that's because a lot of people you hear talking seem to have all the answers, and I immediately doubt that. And I think what you're saying is that there's still mysteries out there. There's still things, layers of complexity to these answers.
Yes, and I think I enjoy living with that mystery. You know, we have questions. When we know the answer and it's really clear, let's acknowledge that. But when we don't really know, I think we do ourselves harm if we try to imagine that we understand everything, or we make up a story to explain something and then put our absolute faith in that. I think it's better just to say there are some things we really don't know.
I was definitely thought that was the perfect answer for that question, because that's something you probably encounter quite a bit. Yeah, I assume, you know, when you're doing book signings and.
Suffering's a big question for every person, because, you know, we don't understand the mystery of suffering and how to live through it, and it's such an intense experience for us. So yeah, it comes up all the time.
I can't wait to read this book, An Unquenchable Thirst. Now, you said you went to school after you left what was
the Missionaries of Charity.
Yeah, Missionaries of Charity. So you left after you and went back to school?
I went back to school. I got my undergraduate degree back in the town I'd grown up in Beaumont, Texas, at Lamar University, and then I got a degree in creative writing from Goddard College in Vermont.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, because most people who write books probably just have somebody else write the book, say, but you wanted to write it yourself, so. Well,
yeah, I think I wanted to tell my own story.
Your own story, yeah. I think that's amazing. Now, did you say you're planning on writing a second book?
I'm working on another book now. It'll be kind of the follow-up. This book talks about those 20 years that I was with the sisters, and then this will talk about after that, coming back and re-entering a kind of a normal life and the sort of questions that I had.
And I think you mentioned you were doing a workshop too. This probably won't air in time, but you do workshops also?
I do workshops also. I'm going to be doing a workshop this weekend before Thanksgiving at Open Studio in Groton, and we're going to be asking ourselves, what is it that we believe? I think it's something for each one of us to sort out, because we all have been told so many times, you know, what it is we're to believe, what we're to think, and now we get all sorts of different ideas from different places, and we need to sort it out and figure out for each one of us what it is I believe.
It's just, this was an amazing talk you gave, and I just had one other thing I want, something that's a little bit probably, but I was just thinking a coincidence. Didn't Princess Diana and Mother Teresa die? Did they die on the same day, or?
They died within a week of each other.
Okay,
Princess Diana died at the end of August, and Mother died at the beginning of September. And I was actually there when the two of them met for the first time. They met in Rome at the house where I was living, and that was a special privilege. And that story is also in the book about Mother Teresa and Diana.
Because she seemed to have a real, Princess Diana seemed to have a real, you know, need to help the needy people, and people who were in, you know.
Diana was a very loving woman also, yes, and she wanted to help people who were disadvantaged in various ways. She reached out especially to people with AIDS and to people who were victims of landmines. Those were kind of two of her big groups of people, but she did all sorts of other good things too.
Well, this is amazing to have a book out on, and to have had that relationship with Mother Teresa, the way you call her mother, and it's like, do you feel her presence now? I mean, around you? Do you?
Oh, every now and then I dream, and she'll show up in my dreams.
Oh, that's really,
The way that I think, you know, any person that you've been really close to, you'll think about from time to time. I definitely, you know, think about her, and I've written about her. Yeah, she's somebody really important to me.
You know, and it's when you talk about it, it really shows that, you know, the closeness that you and her had, and then, you know, the love. It was like, it really comes through in your talks.
Well, thank you. I'm glad.
Now, the path to sainthood, how is that? Is she on? I'm sure she's on the path to sainthood, but
Yeah, there are several steps, and so Mother Teresa has passed all but the last step. So she's now beatified, so that her official title is Blessed Teresa of Calcutta. And to be beatified, you have to have the heroic virtues recognized by the Church and also one miracle. And so she had that, and now they're waiting to have the second miracle approved. And then there'll be the canonization for full sainthood.
that's an amazing thing because, I mean, how many, I don't know how many people actually attain sainthood in these modern times. Is that not too many, I assume, not?
Yeah, I don't know the
Yeah,
exact numbers,
yeah.
but John Paul II was very fond of canonizing a lot of people. He wanted to recognize the
he
fact
did?
that people throughout the world can be saints. And so when he was Pope, there were many more people canonized than in previous years.
So you met him, and you met the Pope? Or?
I met him just,
Yeah, just-
briefly like
yeah.
that, because I lived in Rome for 15
Yeah.
years, and we, Missionaries of Charity, also had one house in the walls of the Vatican. Mother Teresa was very firm. She wanted to have a house for the poor inside the Vatican, and eventually the Pope did allow that and had a house built, and we have there women from the street who were homeless who now live inside the Vatican. So I met him at that house several times.
Thanks for letting me interview. This will be nice to let a lot of people see this show that couldn't, be here today. And the book is An Unquenchable Thirst. I can't wait to read this, and it was just amazing meeting you. But thank you, Mary Johnson, for being on
Sure.
Haverhill Community Television. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.